comes from Mr. Ferguson for 5 minutes in history. Today's topic is taxes and tea parties of the American Revolution. How did the British justify each tax?
Well, Miss Owens, the British levied several different types of tax against the American colonists. For instance, you have the Stamp Act in 1765, as well as the Tea Act that came later in 1773. Each of these was enabled to try to pay for British war debts that had been accrued during the French and Indian War in the 1750s. And what ended up happening is this tax was able to pay for actual debt that was accrued during the war, and then the American colonists were actually helping subsidize the cost that was offset by these taxes. At the end of the day, Britain needed to be able to pay for what they owed, and the American colonists benefited the most, and they should have shared.
Why did colonists protest each tax?
Well, the colonists were upset by several things. For a long time, England had allowed colonists to basically govern themselves in a way. While there was still a lot of control when it came to the way that things were handled in the colonies, and there was actually government officials known as governors or colonial governments that were in place that were directly underneath the British control, they still had a lot of say in their own comings and goings. Now, having said that, the colonists became upset with some of these acts because they felt as if the taxation was being imposed on them without representation in Parliament, because there was not specific representation in each of the 13 American colonies in Parliament. So when you look at it that way, that would be like South Carolina having no congressman in the United States government, but still being taxed by them.
Why did the colonists first accept, then later reject indirect taxes?
Well, in the beginning, the colonists did view themselves very much as Englishmen, and most of the petitioning that they did were for rights as Englishmen. They felt that they were very much British. However, in the end, they later began to reject this idea because of the study of the Enlightenment ideals. All right? So you had people like John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau who espoused individual liberties and freedoms and self-government and government for the people and by the people and those ideals. So the main issue at hand became that not only could the American colonies govern themselves, but they should govern themselves, which meant that taxation without representation was no longer valid in their eyes.
Why didn't Parliament understand the no taxation without representation argument?
They didn't understand this because they felt as if there was representation in Parliament. You must understand that the King of England and the Prime Minister felt like that the colonists had been represented equally. And as a matter of fact, like we discussed earlier, that during the French and Indian War, the colonists had benefited the most from that war. And obviously this created a major expense for the British government, and since the colonists benefited the most, shouldn't they share some of the cost to offset the issue of paying back those debts? And that's the way that Britain felt about this. So within the actual England proper, government felt as if that they were looking out for the best interest of American colonists, yet the American colonists felt like they needed direct representation in Parliament.
This has been your 5 minutes in history with Jordan Owens
And Mr. Ferguson. Until next time, this one's in the history books.